My name is Haley Brooks, and the first thing I heard when I walked into that ballroom was her voice. Madison Clark, my brother's flawless fiance, leaned toward her bridesmaids with a champagne glass balanced perfectly in her hand and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Oh, great, the small town girl finally showed up." They laughed, not quietly, not awkwardly, confident laughter, the kind that assumes everyone in the room agrees. Madison did not even look at me. To her, I was background noise, an inconvenience, a stain on the aesthetic of her engagement party. What she did not know, what no one in that room knew, was that 3 years earlier, my signature had gone on the deed to this building, the Hawthorne Grand Hotel, every chandelier glowing above her head, every polished marble tile beneath her heels, every glass of champagne being poured that night, all of it belonged to me. I stood there, calmly, holding my coat, letting the insult pass through me like air. I did not react. I did not flinch, because I had learned something important a long time ago. When people underestimate you, they show you exactly who they are, and sometimes that is all the power you need. Madison thought she was marrying into a respectable family. She thought she had won. She thought I was nothing more than the quiet sister who never quite measured up. She was wrong about all of it. By the end of that night, the truth about Madison Clark, her parents, and this entire engagement would be on full display for everyone to see. And that single careless whisper was going to cost her everything she had built her life around. So I smiled, stepped fully into the room, and let the party continue. Because the best kind of reckoning does not rush, it waits. I am 32 years old, and I grew up in a small town outside Savannah, the kind of place where everyone knows your name before you are old enough to decide who you want to be. Growing up, I was always the second version. My older brother Ryan was the standard, the example, the one my mother talked about with pride. If Ryan did well, it was expected. If I did well, it was a surprise. And surprises do not build confidence. They teach you to stay small. My mother, Elaine, never said she was disappointed in me. She did not have to. It lived in the pauses, in the way she corrected my posture but praised Ryan's ambition, in the way she introduced him as her son and me as also her daughter. So when I turned 18, I left. I did not leave angry, I left clear. I packed one suitcase, took the first job I could find, and promised myself I would never again beg for space in a room that did not want me. The first years were not glamorous. I shared a tiny apartment with two other women. I worked double shifts. I learned how to stretch a paycheck until it nearly snapped. I ate the same meals over and over because they were cheap and filling. My first real job was in housekeeping at a small boutique hotel. I cleaned rooms quietly while guests slept late. I paid attention. I noticed how the front desk handled problems. I watched how managers spoke to staff and how guests responded. I asked questions when no one was watching. I moved to the front desk, then to operations, then to management. I saved everything I could. I read about real estate late at night. I made careful investments. I took risks only when I understood them. Nothing flashy, nothing reckless. At 28, I bought my first small property. At 30, I owned 3. By 31, I had built Harbor Light Hospitality, a quiet company that focused on boutique hotels with loyal staff and steady returns. The Hawthorne Grand became my flagship. I never told my family, not because I wanted to punish them, but because success changes the way people look at you, and I had spent my entire life being looked at in ways that made me shrink. Staying quiet felt safer. They thought I was struggling. They thought I was getting by. They never asked, and I never corrected them. Because when you grow up learning that love is conditional, you learn to protect the parts of yourself that matter most. And that night, standing in my own hotel while being dismissed as irrelevant, I realized something. Staying quiet had kept me safe, but it was not going to keep my family safe, and that was about to matter. The engagement party looked exactly like Madison Clark. Perfect on the surface, polished, excessive in a way that tried very hard to look effortless. White flowers everywhere, crystal glasses lined up with military precision, soft music floating through the room, expensive enough to be forgettable. Everything screamed money and taste and control. I stepped further inside, letting my eyes adjust. I was wearing jeans,
boots, and a simple jacket. Nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress. The kind of outfit that tells people you are comfortable exactly as you are. From across the room, Jason Mercer caught my eye. My general manager, he gave me a small nod. Professional, neutral. He knew better to acknowledge me as anything other than a guest. Everything was running smoothly. My staff was calm, focused, proud. That part made me smile. Then my mother found me. Elaine Brooks approached with the same tight expression she had worn my entire life, whenever I embarrassed her by existing incorrectly. Her eyes moved over me slowly, stopping at my boots. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said it was nice that I could make it. Her tone suggested it had been inconvenient. Then she asked why I could not have dressed a little more appropriately. She reminded me that Madison's family was very refined. She emphasized the word refined like it was a lesson I had failed to study. I told her I came straight from work. That was true. I just didn't explain what work meant. Elaine sighed, the familiar sound of disappointment wrapped in patience. She told me to try not to stand out tonight. Then she turned and disappeared back into the crowd. 20 seconds. That was all it took to feel 12 years old again. I watched Madison from across the room. She was working the crowd like a professional. Air kisses, soft laughter, perfect posture. Every movement calculated, every smile practiced. Her parents stood nearby. Gerald Clark had a loud confidence that felt rehearsed. He laughed too hard. He shook hands too aggressively. He checked his phone more often than he should have. Cynthia Clark wore jewelry that caught the light constantly. Beautiful pieces, expensive looking, but she touched them often, fingers brushing her necklace and rings, like she needed to reassure herself they were still there. Something about them felt off. Not wrong exactly, just unstable. Ryan finally noticed me and walked over. My brother looked proud, relaxed, like a man who believed he had won something valuable. He hugged me briefly and said he was glad I came. He asked if I had met Madison yet and said she was incredible. I told him I had seen her. That was enough for him. He was already looking past me, scanning the room, checking boxes in his head. Some things never change. As he walked away, I caught Madison watching me, not openly, not directly, the way people look when they are assessing a threat. She smiled when our eyes met, and in that smile, I saw it. Not kindness, not confidence, calculation. And for the first time that night, I felt a quiet shift in my chest, because people who have nothing to hide do not look at others that way, and Madison Clark had just marked me as a problem. I was still standing there when Ryan came back to me a few minutes later. He looked pleased with himself, like a man enjoying the attention that comes with a big life milestone. He said something about how crazy the night felt, how lucky he was. Then, casually, like it meant nothing, he mentioned the necklace. He said our mother had given Madison Grandma Ruth's necklace as an engagement gift. He even laughed and said Madison loved vintage things. For a moment, I couldn't hear the music anymore. That necklace had belonged to our grandmother, a simple gold chain with an antique pendant worn smooth from decades of being held between her fingers, when she was thinking, when she was worried, when she was praying. Before she passed, she had pressed it in my hand and told me it was for me. She said I was the dreamer, the one who would leave and still come back stronger. She said she wanted me to carry something of hers with me. My mother had been standing right there when she said it. I looked across the room. There it was, resting against Madison's collarbone like it had always belonged there, catching the light, being admired by people who had no idea what it meant. Something inside me went quiet. I told Ryan I needed some air and walked toward the hallway outside the ballroom. The noise faded behind me. The carpet softened my steps. My breath came shallow, controlled. I was standing there when I heard Gerald Clark's voice. He was on the phone a few feet away, his back turned. His tone was low and sharp, the confident warmth gone. He said they needed the wedding to happen, that everything depended on it. He paused, listening. Then he said the Brooks family had money, that once they were officially connected, things would settle down. They just needed to get through the ceremony. I felt my stomach drop. The Brooks family did not have money. My parents had a house, yes, a modest one. I knew for a fact there had been a second mortgage on it. I knew because for the past 4 years, that mortgage had been quietly paid on time every single month, by me. Gerald ended the call and turned, his smile sliding back into place the moment he re-entered the ballroom. I stayed in the hallway, frozen. My grandmother's necklace stopped being the most important thing in my mind, because now I understood something far more dangerous was happening. This engagement was not about love, it was about access, about survival, about attaching themselves to a family they believed had resources. And suddenly, every nervous glance, every forced laugh, every too perfect smile made sense. I was no longer watching a celebration. I was watching a con, and my brother was standing right in the middle of it. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. I went back into the ballroom with different eyes. I was no longer a guest, I was an observer. Every movement felt louder. Every smile felt thinner. Gerald kept checking his phone. Cynthia hovered close to Madison, whispering in her ear whenever someone asked a question that went too deep. Madison herself looked radiant, but there was tension behind her eyes, hunger, urgency. That's when the truth finally settled into place. For 4 years, I had been sending money home through Harbor Light Hospitality, mortgage payments, utility bills, medical expenses, quiet transfers that never had my name attached. I did it because they were my family, even when they didn't treat me like one.
But my mother did not know it was me. In her mind, it had to be Ryan, her successful son, her responsible child, the one she proudly talked about to her friends. I could picture it clearly. Elaine mentioning how lucky she was, how Ryan always took care of them, how money was never an issue anymore. The Clarks listened. They researched. They saw a home that never missed a payment, parents who seemed financially stable, a son positioned as the provider. To them, it looked like quiet wealth, the kind people hide. So they made their move. Madison found Ryan, perfect on paper, trusting, kind, desperate to be chosen. And I was invisible enough to be ignored. That was when Madison approached me. She slid in beside me with a bright smile, her hand resting lightly on my arm. To anyone watching, it looked friendly, intimate even. The moment we were out of earshot, the smile vanished. She asked why I sent money home every month. She said it did not make sense for someone who barely mattered to the family. She said it felt desperate, like I was trying to buy love. She told me Ryan had explained everything, how I was jealous, how I never fit in, how the family tolerated me out of pity. She suggested it would be better for everyone if I faded away after the wedding. Nobody would miss me, she said. I listened, calm still, because now I understood exactly who she was. I left her standing there and found Jason near the service entrance. I asked him to quietly pull public records on the Clark family, business filings, lawsuits, anything unusual. He did not ask questions. He never did. When he returned, his face had changed. There were shell companies, dissolved partnerships, civil complaints quietly settled and buried, patterns that repeated across different states. This was not just a bad feeling anymore. It was confirmation. I stepped outside, took out my phone, and made 2 calls. First, to my lawyer, then to a forensic accountant I trusted. Because when the truth threatens your family, guessing is not enough. You make sure. The first call came back from Priya Shah. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, the sound of someone who had found exactly what they expected and something worse underneath. She told me the Clark name did not exist the way they claimed. She had traced similar patterns in another state under different identities. Same structure, same flow of money, same disappearing act right before collapse. Madison Clark was not Madison Clark. Her real name was Tiffany Reed, and Gerald and Cynthia were not her parents. They were partners, long-term, experienced. They had been running the same scheme for years, changing names and locations just before everything fell apart. This engagement was not a celebration. It was an exit strategy. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a moment, letting the engine idle. The concrete walls felt colder than the ballroom, safer. Then my lawyer, Lucy Hart, called. She confirmed everything. Federal investigators had been tracking this group for months. They kept slipping through jurisdiction gaps, moving just fast enough to stay ahead, until now. Lucy said she had already contacted the lead investigator, Agent Daniel Ruiz. She was nearby, close enough to move once the evidence was public. I took a breath and made a decision. I was not going to drag this out quietly. I was not going to warn them. And I was not going to let my brother walk into a marriage built on lies. I went back inside and found Jason. I handed him a small drive.
On it were verified court filings, financial records, identity documents, and photos connecting Tiffany Reed to previous schemes. I told him that during Gerald's toast, the screens needed to change. No commentary, no theatrics, just facts. Jason looked at the drive, then at me. He nodded once. I checked my phone. Ryan had texted me. He said something felt off. He asked if we could talk. I typed a short reply. I told him to wait until after the toast, because if I spoke now, he might warn her, and if he warned her, she would disappear. Some truths need witnesses. I took my place near the back of the room, the music softened, glasses were raised, the clock on my phone ticked closer to 9, and for the first time that night, I did not feel small. I felt ready. Gerald Clark stepped up to the microphone at exactly 9 o'clock. The room quieted. Conversations faded. Glasses were lifted, faces turned toward the small stage with polite anticipation. Gerald smiled, the way men do when they believe the room belongs to them. He thanked everyone for coming, talked about family, about legacy, about how proud he was to welcome Ryan into their lives. He said Madison had finally found the man she deserved. Behind him, the large screen still showed a slideshow of smiling photos. Ryan and Madison at dinners, on vacations, carefully framed moments of happiness. Gerald raised his glass. He said, "To love, to family, to forever." That was when the screens went dark. For half a second, people assumed it was a technical issue, a glitch. Someone chuckled awkwardly. Then the first document appeared, a court filing, official, stamped, dated, an investigation into financial fraud. The name Tiffany Reed was highlighted. A murmur rippled through the room. Gerald froze. The screens changed again. Financial charts, shell companies, money flowing in circles that made no sense unless you knew what you were looking at. Headlines from another state, a real estate scheme, investors who lost everything. Then photos. A younger Tiffany Reed standing beside the same two people now calling themselves Gerald and Cynthia Clark. Different clothes, different names, same faces. Madison's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Ryan stared at the screens, then at Madison, then back again. Gerald grabbed the microphone, laughing too loudly. He said there had been a mistake, a technical error. He demanded someone fix it, but the screens kept moving. That was when I stepped forward. Jason's voice came through the speakers, calm and steady. He said he would like to introduce the owner of the Hawthorne Grand Hotel and CEO of Harbor Light Hospitality. He said my name, Haley Brooks. The room went silent. My mother's face drained of color. Ryan's mouth fell open. Madison looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I took the microphone from Gerald's shaking hand. I said I was sorry to interrupt the celebration, but I believed people deserved to know who they were celebrating. I spoke calmly, no accusations, just facts. I said the identities were false, that the money was stolen, that this engagement was part of a larger scheme. Madison screamed that I was lying. She called me jealous, bitter, nobody. I smiled and asked her if I had also invented the federal investigation that had been following them for 2 years. As if on cue, the doors opened. 4 agents walked in, badges visible, expressions firm. Agent Danielle Ruiz stepped forward and placed a hand on Gerald's arm. She told him he was under arrest. Madison tried to run. She did not make it far. And in that moment, everything she had built collapsed in front of everyone she had tried to impress. The room did not erupt like movies make moments like this look. There was no shouting, no chaos, just silence. A heavy, stunned quiet as Gerald and Cynthia were escorted out in handcuffs, their confidence stripped away with every step. Madison, or Tiffany, screamed once. Then security led her out too, her perfect image broken beyond repair. The engagement party was over. Ryan found me near the bar a few minutes later. He looked lost, smaller somehow, like someone whose future had vanished in a single night. He asked me how I knew. I told him the truth. I said I listened, I watched. I noticed the things people overlook when they are busy being admired. He apologized, not loudly, not defensively, just honestly. I told him sorry was a beginning. Then my mother approached me. Elaine did not criticize my clothes. She did not correct my tone. She simply stood there uncertain. I showed her the bank records on my phone. Years of payments, quiet support, no names attached. I told her it was me. She looked at the screen, then at me. Her voice broke when she said my name. Later, someone noticed the necklace on the floor, Grandma Ruth's necklace. It had fallen during the chaos. Ryan picked it up carefully and placed it in my hand. He said it was always meant for me. It felt right there, like something returning home. We did not fix everything that night. Real healing doesn't work that way, but something shifted. Weeks later, life moved forward. The investigation continued. The truth settled where it belonged, and I returned to my work, to my hotels, to the quiet life I had built without needing anyone's approval. Here's what I learned. People will try to make you feel small because it makes them feel safe. Let them. While they're busy looking down at you, they will never see how far you have risen. If this story spoke to you, like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. This is the art of revenge.